My name is Dr. Kevin Pecca. I wanted to make a podcast that exposes people to the true miracles of life and health. All the guests on this show have been specially picked because they bring something positive to the world. They have some of the most amazing and inspiring life stories. These people have a passion for living, healing, and leaving the world better than they found it. There is something inside these people that made them keep fighting through all the tough times, even when people told them it was not possible. They carried on and made their lives beautiful again. And now they are sharing their experiences with the world. This is the Expect Miracles podcast. Enjoy the show. Dr. John Stenberg is a talented Blair upper cervical chiropractor out of Colorado Springs, Colorado at Zenith Chiropractic. Not only does Dr. John have an incredible story that started at birth on why he became a healer, but he has also seen family members get their health back through the miracle of chiropractic. Today on the podcast, Dr. John shares his journey and what it takes to be a dedicated Blair upper cervical doctor. Please welcome Dr. John Stenberg. Today on the Expect Miracles podcast, we have Dr. John Stenberg out of Colorado. Dr. John is a Blair upper cervical chiropractor. He's doing some great work out there in Colorado. Dr. John, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Kevin, man. I appreciate you having me on. I'm a fan of the show. I've listened, and so it's going to be fun to share a little bit about my story with the audience and just to chop it up with you a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm pumped. I got to spend a good amount of time with you at the Blair conference a couple weeks ago. Really loved all the great stuff you were telling me and all the success you were having in your office. So I'm excited to jump into that today. But before we get into that, John, where are you from originally?
So I was actually born here in Colorado Springs, which is where I live and practice now. But when I was young, I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where my dad's from. So I grew up there. So that's where I'm from. But Colorado Springs, in certain ways, has always been, sort of home for me and my family. So it's a lot of fun to be back here, getting involved in the community and living life and practicing here. So, but grew up in Pittsburgh area, Western Pennsylvania.
How'd you like that?
It was fun. It's the only place that I knew. So small town USA, which I think has its pros and its cons, but it was a great community. We got into a lot of different sports and things growing up and activities. So we had plenty of opportunity to be kids and to grow up and have fun. And spending the summers coming out to Colorado, visiting the mountains and experiencing that, was always kind of planted the seed in my head that, whatever I did when I grew up, I wanted to do it here.
It's breathtaking out there. Like there's some views when you're out there, you're like, this is fictitious. It like almost looks like a picture.
It's a different world. Yeah, but it's a good one. And there's a lot of great folks here too. So.
Now, John, how did you get into the healing profession? Was there something that happened when you were growing up? Did it come later?
Yeah, so that's an interesting story. So, and I don't think we've talked about this before, but when I was born prematurely. And for those that are a little bit familiar with some of the complications that can happen in the birth process, I contracted a Group B Strep infection. So basically that's bacterial infection, that babies could get that affected lung function and brain function and those sorts of things. So at the time, 80s there, they didn't necessarily have the information and the techniques to manage it like they do now. So it was fairly life-threatening at the time.
Absolutely, because you were premature too.
Right. So my entrance into this world in my first few weeks and months of life were pretty rough. And the name of the podcast is fitting because, essentially my parents were told that I was too sick, I was too premature, I wasn't strong enough, and that I wouldn't pull through. So they more or less had mentally prepared my parents to enjoy the brief bit of time that they had with me, but not expect to take me home.
Wow, man, that's some heavy stuff.
Indeed. But, my parents did not accept that report. They expected a miracle. They didn't give up hope, and I pulled through. So lots of prayers, lots of time spent with me there in the NICU, and, life always finds a way. And so I think that all that to say how I got into what I'm doing, I think that literally since my birth, I've had a purpose to help facilitate healing in others. I have a certain appreciation of life that I feel like every day is a bonus for me.
Yeah, that's funny you mentioned that because I was a premature baby as well, and I had pretty much the similar story going on. Even though you're so young and you don't remember that, I think there's something that definitely is triggered in you, even that early stage in your life, that it almost makes you a fighter or appreciate. I mean, you don't remember anything that's going on, but there's definitely something engraved in you that made you keep fighting. which I think definitely sticks with you throughout your life.
No doubt about it. Now everything we know about neuroplasticity and the social vagus and the way that the nervous system develops at that age, I think you're right. There are certain things that are imprinted that, it becomes, if nothing else, almost an intrinsic duty of ours to help folks facilitate life and to reach their potential, because we kind of understand that. Whether or not it's something you can put your finger on, you have that appreciation that I think motivates a lot of what we do. And a lot of folks that are in healing arts or healing professions do have stories like that. So, but how I got into chiropractic is a totally different sort of conversation. So I had no intention of being a doctor or doing those sorts of things. I mean, growing up, I wanted to do different things that kids want to do, like be a trained conductor, a professional athlete, or just stuff like that. So when I graduated high school, I really didn't have much direction. So I went to a community college local. I figured I need to get certain prerequisites and start off my education.
Yeah, that's a great way to do it.
So I did that. And when I transferred, I settled into a biology degree. I figured I wanted to do something to help people, maybe something in the healthcare field. So I just basically got my pre-med degree. So throughout the whole time, I was working in a hospital through summers and vacations. And so I was really paying attention to a lot of the different departments and the different fields and the different options that were there. And I met a lot of folks that were doing a lot of good and helping folks, but it wasn't really anything that resonated with me. I didn't really see a lot of vibrancy there. There wasn't really folks that were thriving. So nothing really settled with me. So the only other option that I thought I had was dentistry. So I actually started an internship with a dentist.
Really?
Yeah, had kind of had in my mind that would be my trajectory. I could help people that way. It wasn't a hospital setting. There was a wellness component to it, which was the hygiene aspects and those sorts of things. So that, just seemed like a good idea. Meanwhile, going through all that, my little sister, she's only 2 years younger than me, but she developed ulcerative colitis late in her high school career. So she's 17, 18 years old, just got extremely ill, right? So
out of nowhere?
Out of nowhere. And, there may have been some things leading up to that I wasn't aware of, but more or less came out of nowhere. So watching her go through the process of treatments and trying to come up with answers and trying to find relief, an otherwise young, vibrant person who would be thinking about the next step of their life and what to do next and what to do after high school and all these sorts of things, was really unfair to watch and really hard to see someone close to you go through that. So in her journey, seeking out answers, family friend or someone made an offhand recommendation. Well, why don't you go visit our chiropractor? He's helped our family with, a bunch of different things. I don't know if he can help you, but you don't really have too much to lose. And that's kind of the place that she was at and that my family was at with it. So
was she on a ton of, did they put her on all the the standard medication and everything as well first?
Yeah, corticosteroids and the whole bit. And really what the conversation was at the time with her doctor was, if we can't get this under control with these medications, then we're going to be talking about surgery and spending the rest of your life essentially with a bag and a decreased quality, all that stuff, right? So absolutely no hope, was instilled in that doctor's approach. But so she started seeing this chiropractor and, within a couple months, and this is, my recollection of the scenario, she had done a total 180 and started getting off of her drugs and was recovering her health and her strength. And it was, by all intents and purposes for us, it was a miracle. It was like, in all my studies and pre-med and all that kind of thing, I never really knew much about chiropractic. So it wasn't something on my radar even. I just kind of assumed that it was for neck and back pain, which she didn't have, right? She had a very functional problem. So by this time, I had graduated college. I was filling out dental school applications, kind of half-heartedly because it really wasn't my purpose and it wasn't something I was passionate about. So I went with her to an appointment. I thought, I want to see what this guy's into. What is he doing with her that's made such a difference? And this guy practiced in Western Pennsylvania for a long time. Dr. Pizzone, I think he did some SOT and some network and a conglomeration of different techniques, different chiropractic approaches. Very different than the way that I practice, 100%. But
it was working.
He was the first person to introduce our family to this concept that the body has the ability to heal itself. Nobody had talked about that. Up to this point, nobody had considered that with my sister's health issues. So I thought that was a really unique perspective. So watching, he had a big open adjusting area, which for folks that maybe not too familiar with the different types of chiropractic settings, he had a large room with like 8 or 10 tables in it. And he had multiple people on the tables at once. And he was kind of working back and forth, taking care of someone over here, then coming over and doing adjustment there and just kind of moving around that way. But it was one of the first doctor's offices I'd ever been into that everybody seemed to be happy and having a good experience. And so that was kind of fun to watch. And I watched him work on my sister, and it didn't seem like much. And then he asked me if I wanted to get adjusted. And in my mind, I kind of thought, oh, well, I don't have any problems. That's okay. I don't need an adjustment. And the way I remember it, he said something to the effect of, you don't have to have a symptom to need to have an adjustment. I thought, all right, well, if you're game, I'm game. So, lay down. He did a little bit of what he does. I don't remember exactly what he did, but I got my first adjustment there. And my sister and I went out. I think we went to a Starbucks or somewhere after the fact. And there's a couple things that I distinctly remember in terms of changes that I noticed in my body. Number one was that I felt like I was breathing deeper. A lot of folks have that sort of experience. But the other one that I remember vividly, which was really strange at the time, was that it almost seemed like colors were brighter. As we're driving down the road, I thought, man, things just look bright and really crisp. So I kind of noticed those two functional changes and thought, man, there's something to what he was talking about, because I'm seeing some of it for myself.
It's like someone turned the power back on in your brain.
That's a catchphrase that we've heard in chiropractic.
Absolutely.
And, I experienced some of that. So I had a buddy at the time who was studying, at Pitt. He was getting ready to go to chiropractic college. And he's the only person I knew that knew anything about chiropractic besides this doctor. So I got together with him and said, hey, what's the deal? What are you going to go study? Where are you going to go to school? Like, tell me a little bit about this field. And he went into this whole thing about straights and mixers and how there's different philosophies of chiropractic and how we approach taking care of patients, which was really confusing to me. But I thought,
yeah, that's the most confusing thing when you hear that for the first time. You're like, I don't even know what you're talking about.
Right. So I kind of took his input. I started researching a handful of schools and decided on a weekend I went and visited a handful of schools, Life University in Atlanta, Georgia. I went to Northwestern, which is up in Minneapolis, St. Paul area. I visited Dewville, which is in Buffalo, and I kind of just got a flavor of the different options. When I visited Life University, something about the atmosphere there on campus really resonated with me, and I just thought, this is where I need to be. So I ditched my dental school applications, went ahead and applied to start the next quarter. And that's what I did. So that was, I think, October of 2012. I was there January 2nd, 2013 in my first quarter of chiropractic college. Total blank slate. I knew nothing outside of that one adjustment and a handful of experiences, which I think was a huge benefit to me going through school and just kind of taking it all in. Kind of the evolution of how I got into upper cervical chiropractic is just taking everything in, assessing it, trying it, learning it, and ultimately kind of settling into what made the most sense and resonated the most with me.
Now, John, I have a question for you. So a lot of people I talk to have that feeling about Life University. They love the atmosphere. There's a certain energy there. And I would say there's only about, would you agree, about 4, 5, maybe 6 schools in the entire world chiropractically that are teaching sound upper cervical classes at the university?
Yeah, that sounds to be about right. And I think...
So I definitely didn't get that at my school. What was it like at Life? Do they introduce it to you right away? Did you hear it through the grapevine? Because I have so many people that come into my office and are like, how does nobody know about Blair upper cervical chiropractic?
Right. It's the best kept secret in chiropractic, which to me makes no sense because it was one of the first evolutions of chiropractic. It was really developed to be the quote unquote gold standard. No, but at Life University, our first technique class was a toggle recoil class. So our first exposure to anything related to taking care of patients was an upper cervical technique. So
that's great.
Yeah, we had a great doctor who taught that class, Dr. Franz. He was a kale red coat. So he was one of these really hardcore knee chest guys. And he was having us read excerpts from volume 18, the chiropractic green book.
He was having you guys read the green books? That's unreal.
Yeah, we got into volume 18. We got into learning some of the side posture toggle adjusting. And so that was our first approach. But just like everyone else, the vast majority of students, I kind of thought, okay, that's great for the top of the neck, but what does that have to do with anything else? And so, I enjoyed it at the time. I took it in, dabbled with it in student clinic, but I, more or less thought I need to do more to take care of my patients. And so, but the seed was planted because of the philosophy and the things that he had introduced us to. I think the seed was planted there.
So, okay, so you said, this makes a little sense, but I'm going to continue to learn, do other techniques. What was it that brought you back and brought you fully on board with Blair?
So, yeah, there's 2 answers to that question. One is just kind of the evolution through chiropractic college. And the second would be my experience as a patient. So I'm a chiropractic patient myself. I don't ask my patients to do anything that I don't do. And so as I'm moving through school, I was getting adjusted regularly by a doc off campus who was taking care of me. Very skilled full spine practitioner, very gentle and precise adjusting the full spine. So that was my experience as a patient. That's what I felt good with at the time. And so that was what I had in mind that I would be doing. But just like most patients, or not most patients, but with some, I kind of got to a point where I plateaued with that type of care. And I was needing the same types of adjustments frequently to maintain the same level of function and just feeling okay. So it kind of got me thinking about what it was that I was going to do. I didn't want my patients to have that experience. So I was exploring other techniques. The two that really kind of led me back to upper cervical, which really have no direct connection, are I took a biogeometric integration class, it's a tonal-based technique. It uses some of the energy work. It uses some of the different types of adjusting procedures and looks at things from a more holistic perspective that way. But they introduced me to the concept of biotensegrity. I don't know if that's something that sounds familiar to you, Kevin. Have you heard about that?
So that's pretty much the body's ability to just almost like a balloon, or just like to...
Yes. So the idea is that the architecture of the body, the way that it's designed, has both compressive and resistive elements. So you've got bones, that are the structural framework of the body, but you've also got the soft tissues that hold everything together, right? So it's the tension of the soft tissues that really holds the skeleton in place and working like it should. You can't just stack up a skeleton without the muscles and tissues, and it doesn't stay together. So it's the tension of the system that kind of keeps it balanced. So anyway, with that, the idea was what you do at any part of that system affects the system as a whole. And so what that led me to believe is, well, then I don't have to adjust every single area to affect every single area. So which parts would I want to focus on to get the best result with minimal adjusting, if that's true with the way that the body is designed architecturally. And then the second class that had a lot to do with that in school was actually a lower body arthrokinematics class. So we were learning a lot about how to understand the biomechanics of the foot, ankle, knee, hip, on up the kinetic chain and all those sorts of things. But they had a system of assessment that worked in a certain hierarchy. And this was Dr. John Downs' paradigm, the 1, 2, 3 paradigm, which basically says the top shelf is the neurological, the next step is the joint motion, and the third level is the soft tissue. So when I started thinking about those types of things, everything kind of led back to the upper cervical spine as being the most important area.
Yeah.
It's the most important area of the spine to take care of from a chiropractic perspective. At the time then, the Blair upper cervical technique was first offered as an elective course. So I jumped right into that. I took it as soon as I could. And a lot of the concepts that I learned there about the asymmetries of the body and how we view the misalignments in x-rays and with imaging, and how each adjustment is tailor fit to the person's biomechanics and anatomy, it answered a lot of questions that I had regarding upper cervicals. That was kind of it for me. Like, it all clicked with Blair, and all those concepts kind of came to a head. So the first thing I did was quit getting adjusted full spine. I went about 3 or 4 months without letting anybody touch me, just kind of let my body settle into a pattern of dysfunction. And I went and saw Dr. Charmaine Herman. She was the one teaching the elective at the time. I said, if you take care of students, then I want to do this. So she got me started, got my Blair x-rays. We got first couple adjustments in, and what I noticed was that I was doing better with fewer adjustments less often. And so for me,
strictly in the upper neck,
that was it. Yeah, I had a handful of adjustments, that my brain fog went away. I felt more balanced structurally. I had things that were, improving that I didn't need to have adjusted. And I thought, man, that's the missing link. And the thing that I've been looking for is how to do this part very, very specifically. So it was a great experience. And I thought, this is something I can dedicate a career to learning and perfecting, serving patients with, because it accounts for all of the things that I value in chiropractic, which is specificity and doing something that's scientifically sound, but based on firm philosophical principles, and something that's conservative.
Absolutely. And you kind of just hit it on the head there too, like dedication, like the Blair upper cervical method. You definitely need to dedicate a lot of time to. Like, I would say doctors have been doing it for more than 5 years. they have dedicated a lot more, because if you don't dedicate your time to it, it's not going to work for you. You have to be very sound and know exactly what you're doing.
You're exactly right, man. And I'm not a jack of all trades type of a guy. I very much like to settle in and focus on something that I'm doing and really work to do it well. So I think a lot of us that get into upper cervical in general, or the different techniques, including Blair, tend to have that motivation. I do have to give a little bit of a shout out to a friend and colleague, Dr. Roger Haddad. He practices Atlas Orthogonal over in Savannah, Georgia.
Nice.
We went through school together. He got into upper cervical. He got it early on. And he was always that guy who was reinforcing those concepts to me and telling me, what are you doing? Want to adjust hips and ankles, you can, all that kind of stuff. So we used to, every Friday night, a group of us would get together and we used to just talk about what was going on in school, the things we were learning, hashing out these types of questions about how do we do the best thing and what's right and what's wrong. And he used to talk about the idea that adjusting people isn't what gets them well. It's not being subluxated, right? And if our philosophy says that a subluxation, which is a misalignment that's causing nerve irritation and distorting the communication between the brain and the body and hampering your body's ability to heal itself, if that's a clinically relevant thing that we need to be focused on as a profession, then there should be a way to not be subluxated, right? Because when I went to saw my full spine chiropractor, if I went 3 times a week, he would adjust me 3 times a week in more than one area. And so I started to think, man, is this just a perpetual thing? Are people just always subluxated until the moment after the adjustment? And how long does that last?
And a lot of people think you need to go to the chiropractor 3 or 4 times a week to get better, which is definitely not true. And what you touched on 2 minutes ago is the healing is not in the adjustment. The healing is in the holding. When it stays in place, when your body has 100% nerve flow and it's able to heal itself. If it keeps popping out, there's not much healing taking place.
Yeah, man. And that's the only people that were talking about that around campus or in chiropractic were the guys who were focused in the upper neck. And in the back of my mind going through school, I always knew that those guys got the best results. There were a lot of cool, flashy things that you could get interested in too, but the upper cervical guys were steady. They knew what they were doing. They got the best results. And so I think that, that was the understanding for me that kind of tied it all together, was it's not in the adjustment, it's in not needing to be adjusted.
Yeah. Well, so if I could just share something real quick. So my experience in chiropractic school, I did not go to a very philosophical school. I went to LACC, great school, helps you get through the boards and everything, but not very chiropractically sound. So I would be in the adjusting room in class, and one instructor would walk by and be like, we're working on the mid back. And he'd be like, I think the subluxation bone out of place is right here at T4. And then somebody else would come around, another instructor would come by and be like, no, I think it's the segment below it. And then somebody else would walk away, and then the person would be like, oh no, it's the segment above that one. So no one really knew where the actual problem is. And what I love about upper cervical is it addresses 3 things: where to adjust, when to adjust, and when not to adjust, which is probably the most important thing. So that was like, oh my God, I know exactly where to go, when to do it, and when not to do it. That's huge in the chiropractic world.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to make the distinction that those other techniques are not necessarily bad. They're helping a lot of people. But when I think about my values in chiropractic and what I want to offer the community, because here's the deal. Physical therapists can manipulate the spine. There are a variety of different options for folks who can do that type of work to temporarily relieve pain, to alleviate muscle spasms, to increase range of motion, and those sorts of goals. But for me, if I want to best express the philosophy, science, and art of chiropractic, which everything has, right? There's a reason why you do what you do, which would be your philosophy. There's the science that validates what it is that you're doing in your procedures. And then there's the art of it, which is taking care of patients and using a technique to deliver on those 2 other principles. For me, it just always came back to doing something unique, doing something specific, and something that's going to be comprehensive. And you've probably had this experience too. A lot of patients, when they come to consult with an upper cervical chiropractor, whether it's Blair or any other technique, it's at first a little bit confusing, right? You have that conversation about, listen, you're not going to need to be adjusted each time you come in. Our goal is to get you to a point of stability. But inevitably, as you're working through a process of care with them, there are those conversations when they, especially the first time they don't need to be adjusted, where it's a different mindset and it's a different concept. So the folks that get it, and we're able to really connect with them and communicate on that level, they really do well. And for other folks, we have to spend a little bit more time educating them on the process and the goals. But I think, and this is probably true for you too, the folks that we see are looking for that. They're not looking for a generalized approach. They're not looking for something open-ended. They want to have goals and work towards improvement.
And another thing too is most of the people that we see have been everywhere else. They've been to the neurologist, they've been to physical therapy, they've been to your standard chiropractic. And in some cases it's worked, but in other cases it hasn't. And they have some serious conditions going on. And when they hear us talking about the upper cervical spine and how we take precise 3-dimensional x-rays and we want to keep everything holding is healing, a light bulb goes off in their head. They're like, oh my God, that's my problem. That's exactly what's going on. This makes so much sense.
I think that I've been in practice for about 1.5 years here in Colorado Springs. I know you're a few years into practice. So we're younger docs and we're finding all these skills and techniques when it comes to communicating with patients and those sorts of things. One of the things that I've really come to realize based on feedback from patients on a routine basis is that a lot of folks don't even listen to their story. They don't really know the whole history. They haven't connected the dots. So when we're sitting and talking with folks about, well, the time where you fell down the stairs when you were 5 years old and were knocked unconscious, that has something to do with the state of your health today. And I know nobody really looked that far into the rearview mirror, but we really try to get a big picture idea of where have you been, what got you up to this point, what was the most likely first domino in a series of events that led to you having this decreased expression of health, because that's where we can start to make the biggest improvements. It might not be an overnight success, it might not be an instant gratification type of a process, but we can change your health trajectory by identifying and working to correct those problems in a meaningful way. And I think that's what they're looking for. Someone to say, there is a problem. It's not in your head. It's been overlooked, but we can find it. We have found it. And now this is what we need to do, to kind of steer the ship.
Absolutely. You just touched on a couple, two very good points. Some of these issues you've been having could have started 15, 20, 25 years ago. And that's why it's very hard for people to connect the dots of what's going on in their health, because it could have happened as young as getting pulled out of the birth canal when you were an infant. So that's very important for them to know. And another thing you said is you do get the cases where people are not feeling well. You give them that first adjustment and boom, they are good. But more times than not, it is a process, because what we just said was this happened 15, 20 years ago. It didn't happen overnight. It's going to take some time to get you back to where you need to be. And I always tell people the first 6 to 8 weeks can be a roller coaster ride. Couple good days, couple bad days.
That's so true, man. And my wife's experience with Blair Chiropractic was exactly like that. So we moved out here to Colorado. First thing I did was try to find a Blair chiropractor to take care of us. So we connected with Dr. Joe Hug. He's up in Lakewood, Colorado. He's been practicing Blair for 40 years. We got her x-rays, got her adjusted. She was competing as a pretty high-level track and field athlete at the time as a heptathlete. Had some issues related to hurdling and jumping and throwing and different things that she'd been trying to work out technically. And he was the first guy to identify some of the imbalances related to her structural misalignment. And as he started to clear out the neck, which I hadn't been able to do in chiropractic school, in which conventional chiropractic approaches hadn't got to, she went through it. Her muscles started reorganizing and rebalancing, and things started shifting. She didn't sleep well for 3 weeks. She had sore, achy leg muscles and all these types of things. And this is a healthy, fit person. So she had that experience, and coming out the other end of it, it solved a lot of problems. But initially, that first process of the body breaking some things down to rebuild,
absolutely,
was not comfortable.
The healing process can be very intense. Very.
Yeah, and I tell people everyone has a problem, or everybody's okay until they're not, right? So a symptom comes up, something happens to you. For most folks that we see, that's not the case. Things gradually started over time or came out of quote unquote nowhere. So for us, it's always a problem solving type of a situation in terms of figuring out, man, where did the wheels come off in this situation? Because your body did the best that it could to compensate and adapt for that change over time. But once you start to reach your limits of adaptation, tissues start to fail. And when tissues start to fail, we start to have pain and dysfunction or some sort of symptom show up, which is where most folks enter the conversation of, what do I do now?
Absolutely. And John, that's what I really enjoy about your story, is because you definitely had some aches and pains and some things going on, but it was really nothing to be like overly concerned about, right? It was almost like just day-to-day stuff.
Right.
And then so when you were telling me, I've been seeing this in a lot of people, the C3, the third bone in your neck, can be very integrated with how, like, your mood, your overall, your general well-being, and obviously it can be the atlas and axis, but when you do take care of that and they're still having some trouble, that C3 can be a huge game changer. And that's kind of what happened with you, right?
Yeah, it's really interesting in the way that different techniques develop. So the vast majority of upper cervical techniques only focus on adjusting the atlas, which is the top bone in the neck, the one that the skull sits right on top of. Dr. Blair, who developed the type of work that we do, he had a system for analyzing and assessing the bones of the cervical spine down to C4, but those rules apply. So we can look at each level and identify, areas of concern. And so when I had my first evaluation done, we had identified some issues at the atlas as the primary area, but also at the third cervical, so 2 bones below that. It's not something that I had adjusted very frequently. Right, exactly, very specifically. And so this experience that you're talking about happened in December of just last year. I'd been a Blair patient for, about 2 years at that time.
That's amazing. Wow.
Yeah, I'd not had that adjustment, and that's what showed up in the analysis for the day. So Dr. Hug laid me down on the table. He adjusted the third cervical, and it was great. No real fireworks on the table or anything like that, but I can specifically think of several things that happened in life, in my personal life, and just in some things that I had been working through that really took a turn for the better. And so the way I like to characterize it is, something in me, when I got that cleared out, just became more coherent. I started to understand the way that certain habits that I developed were affecting different areas of my life and what I needed to do to go about correcting those things. So it wasn't even anything necessarily physically related with that adjustment and the increased level of function that I got from having that cleared, but just the awareness of some things in my life.
Yeah, almost like a moment of clarity, would you say?
Yeah, 100%. I think I just kind of took it to the next level in terms of my consciousness and the willingness to do some of the hard work on personal development. And so talking with a few other Blair doctors about that, they kind of get this smile on their face like, yeah, you'll see that occasionally with those lower cervical segments or that third cervical. It has a lot to do with apparently, the mood and mental clarity and different things related to, that type of function. So having that experience myself, because I've seen people get well of aches and pains and different things like that, but having that additional experience really cemented for me philosophically that this just goes beyond the physical expression of health. This goes to a deeper level of expression, which includes the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of health that, if we're being honest, are integrated with the physical body as well. So having that experience for me and seeing that there's a really smart way that the body's designed so that we can have structural inputs that produce greater levels of function throughout our being, whether it's the physical body, the mental, emotional, spiritual self as well. That's a really powerful thing. And I think it's something that we need to remember as upper cervical chiropractors when we get really fixated on how we can help folks with certain conditions that have done well with our types of care, whether it's Meniere's disease or different types of vertigo and migraines and things like that traditionally we're really able to help solve. But that's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of the full benefit of what folks get out of this type of care with consistent routine checkups and letting their body adapt over time.
Yeah, chiropractic is so much more than neck pain and back pain. It is so much more than that. And that just goes to show you, like, that story right there.
Yeah, and I think it's an experience that you have to have as a doctor to really tie in some of the philosophical concepts and some of the theories and the things that you believe. But the thing about belief is there has to be some action associated with it for it to really carry much weight. And so if I was not a patient that was consistent with my care like I asked my patients to be, I would have missed out on that opportunity, right? And so having that consistency and that dedication to my own care and taking care of my own body has now led me to a greater level of service for my patients. And I think that's what ultimately what we have to offer is an improved quality of life an improved expression of your best potential, which puts folks in a position to best serve their world and their community and their family with their talents and their abilities. So we have this idea of the big idea in chiropractic. And I think that's really at the heart of it, is that it does have the potential to shape lives and to shape cultures and to shape societies when people are just expressing more of their potential.
Absolutely. And I feel as if what I've been noticing is sometimes you just don't get everything on the first 5, even 10 visits. Sometimes things through the healing process, the body continues to rebalance. Sometimes your major issue or your major subluxation will show up 2, 3, 4 months down the road. And that's why I like to tell people, give this a fair shot, give this at least 3 months. Sometimes things show up down the road and it will be like a miracle once we get to that. You know, sometimes you do get everything on the first visit, but other people do need more attention, especially if they've been out of alignment for that, you know, like we talked about before, 15, 20-year mark.
Yeah, 100%. I think in all areas of life, we have a tendency to slip back into our bad habits. And so, especially when we're exhausted, when we're run down, you know, when we're wore out. So the physical body is not much different. You're going to have a tendency to resubluxate or to go back out of alignment when your internal resistance is low. And when that happens, it takes less of an external force to put you back out of alignment. So our goal is always going to be, let's build up that internal resistance, keep you in alignment as long as possible so that you can take more, so that your body can process more stressors, whether it's physical, chemical, emotional, all those types of things, so that we can break you out of that cycle of, you know, reverting back to those bad habits. And I think for a lot of folks, they can understand that concept, even if they don't understand some of the technical aspects of the phases of healing and the different things that we talk about.
Absolutely. So, John, where in Colorado are you located and where can people find you to get in your office there?
I'm in Colorado Springs, so we're about an hour and a half south of Denver, depending on traffic, but we're the next biggest city in Colorado, and it's really booming and thriving right now, so it's a great place to be.
A lot of people moving to Colorado.
Yeah, man, it's really thriving, so I'm excited to be here, setting up practice and growing with the community. So I'm here in Colorado Springs, and my practice is called Zenith Chiropractic, and folks can find me online, you know, Zenith Chiropractic Colorado. If you search that, you'll find my website, and I've got links to, you know, social media, Facebook, Instagram, different ways that folks can connect and get an idea about, you know, the things that we're talking about here today and more, as well as find resources for folks that are either in the area or looking for good upper cervical chiropractic. Any part of the country, consider me a resource. Kevin and I can definitely get folks connected with someone near them who can deliver on some of what we're talking about, which is, you know, the real benefits of chiropractic.
Absolutely. So, John, I have 2 more questions for you. One, I'm interested in Colorado, California, Washington, Oregon, the medicinal marijuana. I have one patient that literally flies to Colorado to get her daughter CBD, which, as we know, it doesn't get you high. It's non-psychoactive. It has very strong anti-inflammatory properties, and it does really well with anxiety, depression, and just any condition, seizures, other condition. How does that work in Colorado where you practice? Do you recommend that to any of your patients? Do some of your patients already use it while coming to you?
Yeah, so Colorado is in a kind of an interesting place in that a lot of these substances are still not legal on a federal level. So there's certain state laws that allow you to possess and own and use some of that stuff. But it's not something that I've done a ton of research in, and to be able to say that I would recommend that. But I do have patients who have experienced that either topically or they've ingested CBD. And I've had some folks, you know, with a variety of different conditions that say, look, you know, we live in a state where I can get recreational marijuana.
Yeah.
I would rather take that than OxyContin. And so that's a fair judgment on their part. So it's definitely a part of the culture here for sure. And I think it's interesting for doctors who are in a more, you know, health and wellness oriented industry, you know, to consider, because we get folks approaching us all the time about, you know, offering these products to our patients.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah.
But one thing I think which takes the pressure off of me to do that is the accessibility that we have here. You know,
Very
folks
true,
don't have to fly. You know, they can go across town into any shop and talk to an expert in that field and get a prescription or a green card. So So it's something that's a topic of conversation, but something I stay
And I'm
out
sure
of.
we'll know a lot more information about it as the years to come, because it is still fairly new. And so I just found that interesting that you live in a state that enables that for the patients.
Yeah, and I'll say there's a lot of different perspectives within the community about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. So it's very much, even though we've been into it for a little while here in Colorado, it's very much still a fresh topic of discussion, and we're very much still navigating that.
Definitely. And John, one more thing. If there has been one piece of advice that you've taken with you over the years that's really resonated with you and that's helped you out, what would that be? Could be absolutely anything.
Yeah, I think that, we could spend another hour talking about that. But, I just thought of this. A good friend of mine, we grew up together. He used to say, the meaning of life is to live a life that has meaning. And I think in a lot of ways that kind of sums it up, right? I mean, why we're passionate about what we do is because it matters, right? And because it affects the lives of people. And so you don't have to be an upper cervical chiropractor. You don't have to be in healthcare to do something that matters. But I think folks that are getting a lot out of life are folks that are focused on, doing something that matters, having a purpose that's bigger than just serving themselves. And so that's something that I keep in the back of my mind as I navigate the ups and downs of a new practice and a new family and all those sorts of things. So.
100%. Very well said, John. Okay. John, thank you so much for coming on. Really enjoyed this episode, and look forward to having you on again sometime.
Awesome. Let's do it.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for listening. If you enjoy the podcast, subscribe, give us 5 stars, and leave a review. It really helps boost the podcast and spread the good word. My chiropractic practice is located in West Orange, New Jersey at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. You can also find us on Facebook at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. All of my information is on my website at drkevinpecca.com, drkevinpecca.com. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dr. Kevin Pecca for podcast episodes, patient testimonials, and educational videos. I have daily affirmations and inspirational quotes on Instagram at Easel Affirmations, EASEL Affirmations. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me at drkevinpecca@gmail.com, drkevinpecca@gmail.com. Thank you, everyone, and have a great day. Cheers.